No, no, no. 30 minutes sounds perfect.
Okay, so hey, it's Alexander Lawrence, the Portable Infinite from Los Angeles, and we're trying to keep like interesting. We're trying to interview interesting people here. Writers, artists, musicians. But today we got a real surprise because it's probably like the most interesting person I've interviewed so far. I've done almost 40 now, and it's Catherine Texier. Talking to her from New York. Hello, Catherine.
Hello, Alex.
And she has a new book. It's the After David book. Just come out. It's fresh and maybe her most accessible book yet. We'll get into it, but yeah, Catherine. She's like the right. She's written a lot of novels. Love Me Tender, Panic Blood, The Breakup, Victorine, Russian Lessons. I have Russian Lessons right here. I got it during the COVID
Oh,
era.
good. That was perfect. Yeah,
And
perfect reading.
so is I know this new book is sort of uh been described as a part two of Breakup, but was this the real part two, and maybe this new one's a part three, maybe?
Well, maybe, yeah. I mean, and then there may have been others that I did not write. So,
Yeah, I mean, when talking to Chris Sorrentino, I mean, we've kind of discovered that Gilbert Sorrentino wrote this 500-page novel in the 50s that he never published. I mean, is there a lot of stuff that doesn't see the light of day? That I mean, you have like, I don't know, what is it, like seven novels here?
yeah. Well, I mean, there is one that is very different from all that, which is Victorine. You
Yeah.
didn't mention it's a historical novel that came out. I don't know, maybe 10, 15 years ago. And that was inspired by my great grandmother, who I never met, and who I'm French. So I grew up in France, and she was
What 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 part of France? Where?
well, I was born in Brittany, but I grew up right outside Paris.
Okay.
And that story, it's about this young woman who had two kids and it was in Vendée. It's province of France, right on the Atlantic. And it was during the time when Indochina was a French colony. And according to family lore, she left her husband and two young children. One of them was my grandfather, and to meet a lover in Indochina, which was Saigon in Saigon called Saigon at the time. So I didn't know more than that, but I wrote a whole historical novel about that. So that novel is very different from these other ones.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
kind of. Yeah, because like I was reading some of the reviews of your previous books, and some compare. I mean, you've been compared to like every French writer for the last 100 years, and like some of the earlier ones got compared to Henry Miller, to Anais Nin, to Louis Ferdinand Celine,
uh,
and that one. I mean, I could consider Victorine more kind of like a modernist novel, and maybe like a little Virginia Woolf is in the background. But I mean, I mean, this. I mean, I guess maybe a Virginia Woolf was a Francophile at some point. Maybe I don't know. What do you think about
I'm
that?
not sure. No, I think Victorino is more classic novel, but this one, After David, has been compared to Colette, actually. The French author
Yeah,
Colette. So yeah, it is more. I mean, that have different genre, different styles, but this one is probably more like a short, novel, no short French novels about a relationship and sexual relationship and sort of exploring um, power dynamics and between a man and a woman and I think that it's more in that vein. And Breakup was a memoir, actually, so it was not even a novel. But
right.
there is a connection because it is after this one takes place after a divorce, and Breakup was the story of my divorce a long time ago.
So when I first heard about you in 1990, you were doing Between C and D, and at that time there was a lot of anthologies like High Risk,
Hmm.
and there was like these groups of people. Since I was at San Francisco at the time, I mean, I was friends with Kevin Killian, and I had met Dennis Cooper, and there was this whole thing called New Narrative, and Dennis Cooper had this whole scene around the Beyond Baroque, and then I mean, I probably didn't meet you because I mean I met Lynn Tillman and a few of the New York writers. Mary Gates had moved to San Francisco at that point. Kathy Acker was in San Francisco, so I knew them. So I mean, what do you think about this whole group of people that are kind of connected to high risk or like an edgy fiction or transgressive fiction movement, and the new narrative group? Were you a part of that, or were you just?
Yeah, I mean, not exactly in using those words, but when Joel, my ex-husband, and I published Between C and D, which was from 83 to 1990, so it was right in the middle of that kind of movement. And so I would say, even though we were not using that term, we were right into that. I mean, you didn't mention Bret Easton Ellis, but he was part of that as well. So yeah, these were young writers who were very, edgy, pushing boundaries. It was also a very golden time in the sense that the publishing industry and the readers were very open to that kind of writing, which is not the case now. I mean, definitely everything has become more conservative. But at the time, we were all, and Kathy Acker, we were all, pushing boundaries and trying to write some, yeah, try to explore certain kinds of relationship and certain kind of prose.
Yeah, yeah. You talked about Bret Easton. I mean, Bret Easton Ellis. I mean, I met him in maybe '94, and he was doing a book tour for the what was that book? I have it over here somewhere. It was a book of short stories that he came in around that time, and he told me that was the first book tour he had done. Didn't do book tours for Less Than Zero and American Psycho. Did you do a book tour for Panic Blood or Love?
No, but I did one for Breakup. I did an
Yeah,
international. I did it.
I
Yeah,
knew you then, but
yeah.
that's probably why I didn't meet you because I had met Lynn Tillman and some of the New York people because they had come to San Francisco and done readings in San Francisco at that time,
Oh,
like
I see.
early
Yeah.
90s. That's why I was just wondering. Yeah, I mean, yeah, Brett was definitely kind of. I mean, he likes to see himself as like a lone wolf, but he was kind of part of that or informing that. I mean, okay, so yeah, the breakup. I have it here. That's when we were
Yeah.
in New York. A lot of us. Well, actually, I met you because I was doing Cups magazine, which I have here, and you were in this issue, and me and Joanna Rakoff, who I think she was at the time. She's working at your your agent. The what was that right? Or Curtis Brown or somebody? Or,
No, my agent was always Joy Harris, so I'm not
okay.
sure.
Okay, well
Uh,
maybe I got it wrong, but yeah, I remember we did it. Cups Magazine sponsored a reading series at like Alt Coffee and Thompson Square off of Thompson Square Park, and Joanna Rakoff, like we were gonna coordinate this reading series, and you were a part of it. So I remember going to that one, but I didn't go to the other ones because like it just seemed like she picked a bunch of people from the agency that she worked at, and then it was gonna me and her boyfriend Bob Annecy were gonna all read and stuff. And
mhm.
I go, well, that's I felt like I didn't get to pick anybody. We already got this whole list and stuff and stuff. But I remember you reading at that one, and then yeah, and then the breakup happened, and then there like in New York at that time there was like I mean you would go to there was like KGB bar, there was like all these like part of them Paris Review used to have parties, and it just seemed like an activity, like everything. There was like somebody was doing a reading, and this group of this loose group of people all knew each other and stuff. And it just seemed like it was good. And we were hanging out with Elizabeth Wartzel and Amanda
Yeah.
Filippacci, and there was like, and we were, it was like kind of, it was almost like a scene for a couple years. And like my friend Siobhan was going out with Jonathan Lethem, and it was just I remember. I guess you're doing a reading at the KGB bar again, like this on June 20th. So people should go to that.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Actually, I'm going to read with Jennifer Bell, and who just had a book called Swana in Love. Beautiful, great book. And then Larissa Pham, who's a young writer who writes. It's all about female desire. But my old friend Ken Foster, who was part of the group that you're talking about, he's going to introduce us. I asked him
Oh,
because at
oh,
the
great.
time he was reading the reading series at KGB back then. But the 80s were an incredible time for sure. And that's when Joel and I were publishing the magazine. And it kind of all ended in 1990 in New York. I mean, there was like a really slump. And I think maybe Kathy Acker passed away around that time. I mean, there was like a change of time, you know, like something happened. And that period was kind of ended. The 90s were completely different after that.
Yeah, well, there was also Open City, Thomas Beller, and
Right,
Daniel
right.
Peck. There was a lot of parties at Robert Bingham. I guess he died around that time too. And Kathy died like in the later 90s, like 97. Yeah, I remember one time me and you went to you were doing a reading at KGB, and the guy like criticized you, and you know, I think he wanted me to beat him up or something. I don't know.
I don't remember. Oh, okay. That
One
I
of the
don't remember that.
one of the organizers like sort of like you know, like kind of criticized you for writing the breakup or something like that.
Oh, well, maybe, but I completely blanked it
Yeah,
out.
you blanked it out. No, I thought it was funny. I mean, but I mean, you totally you know, you kind of did a reading and you totally didn't let it affect you. You know, that guy. I don't think he's probably dead too. But
Oh,
yeah, I mean, I just think that I mean, it just seemed like everybody was coming out with the book almost every month. There was like some party, just like it was like a real
sure.
active scene. And yeah, yeah, somewhere around 99 or 2000. I mean, so that whole where there was just like tons of readings, and I mean, in the 90s there was an expansion of Barnes and Noble, so there was all these
Mhm.
bookstores opening up, and before like things started closing down a bit. What's it like in New York now? Like you know, is there still that many readings or book parties to go to?
Yeah, not like there were before. But there are, you know, like Nellie Jackson, for instance, are doing conversations, encounters with writers, especially in their new store at the Seaside Seaport. A lot of readings are in organized, but mostly I would say probably because the publishers, the publicists are organizing them. It's not like these wild readings that we used to have. It's definitely not that. But it's the new generation. So there's a new generation of writers who are very good, but you know, it's just not, I don't even know if there's a movement at all anymore. There used to be back then, but I don't feel that. I mean, there's some very good writers individually, um, probably a lot of lesbian writers, you know, like more about identity politics, I would think. So it's not like it was, but certainly it's still very vibrant. You know, I don't know what it's like in LA, but in terms of writing, New York is still very vibrant.
Yeah, it's starting to bubble up again. There's people are starting. I mean, like you have you've always had like readings at your how apartment there, like invited people over. I mean, you had things. I remember in the 90s, because a couple of us moved there like at the same time. So I was friends. I had met Jonathan Lethem in 94, and then a year later he had a party at your house or something, you know.
Mhm.
It was kind of,
Yeah, actually, I started again about 10 years ago.
oh, is
I
that what
started to
yeah.
have it's a salon. It's called Readings at Catherine's, and it's in my apartment because I haven't moved. I'm still living in that big apartment in the East Village. And so I invite musicians as well. So there's a mix of music, and two or three readers, mostly fiction. And I serve food and drinks. And so it's a little bit like going back to that period, but you know, I get maybe the only one doing that because I'm doing it at home.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, it's a private salon. And I'm trying to keep that going because it's very important for I think for the writers to get together. It's so, I mean, musician is different. They have their own scene, they play together, but writers are so isolated. And I think
Yeah,
it's really important to get together.
yeah, I think writers. I mean, writers should know other writers, and they shouldn't work in a vacuum. I think you know there needs to be more writing colonies too. I don't even know if that still exists.
Yeah, yeah, they still exist for sure. Yeah.
I mean, I forgot to mention. Okay, so Catherine Texier is a novelist, a journalist, and she's a professor. I mean, I took a class with you at the new college. Do you still teach
At
there?
the new school, at
New
the new
school.
school, yeah.
New school. I get there's a new college in San Francisco. I could
Okay. No, I still teach at the new school. Absolutely. Yeah.
and we were I was friend. I remember the breakup when it came out. I mean, there was like a big brouhaha. There was it got coverage in the Village Voice and like
Everywhere. The New
yeah,
York Times, everywhere. Yeah.
New York Times. I mean, well, I'm saying like they yeah, and like at that time in the 90s, you know, the Vanity Fair and Spin magazine, they would have like book coverage and interviews with authors and stuff. And I don't think that's not really there anymore, you know, that whole
Yeah, it did a little bit. Some writers, I mean, the Breakup came out in 98 and it was, it was published in 10 countries in Europe. Um, it's a different scene now for sure.
yeah.
Uh, yeah, sometimes some writers get some coverage in Vanity Fair or in Vogue or Elle for sure, but very few. I mean, my novel Victorine actually won Elle Magazine's Reader's Prize. So it still happens, but it was a more conventional kind of novel. So maybe it was more appealing to a certain type of writers. But otherwise, you could have fending for yourself.
Yeah, I mean the whole idea of the memoir. I mean, I mean, at that time, I mean, there was Elizabeth Wurtzel's uh
Prozac Nation.
Prozac Nation. I mean, I think if Elizabeth Wurtzel was born 10 years later, she would have just been a reality TV star. Her book, I mean, I like parts of it, but I mean, I didn't really take her too seriously as a writer in a way. But like Elizabeth herself was like pretty interesting person, you know, like she had
She
a lot of
was. She
things going
was.
on. And, but like, and then there was Catherine Harrison wrote like A Kiss or I,
Hmm.
I barely even got through that book. And then, yeah, there was right after Prozac Nation, there was Girl Interrupted by Suzanne Kaysen, which is kind of a similar territory. And
Right.
I always thought the memoir was kind of a false category. I mean, I kind of just read this like as if it was a novel and stuff. I just think the memoir was like, I mean, who's going to fact check that? Or, you know, or people would come up with these books and, you know, this I mean of course this is like is good as a novel or and there was a big difference because Elizabeth Wurtzel wrote Prozac Nation when she was 27 and stuff and like when I think of before those books of the 90s I would think of like you know Sartre the Words which he wrote like way later in life, you know, he didn't really write a memoir when he was like 27 or something, you know, or you know, just in the French writers, you know, like it was kind of weird that she wrote. I think a lot of people are writing memoirs and they're like before they're 30 and stuff. That just seems kind of weird. Why don't you just come out as a novel? Why does it have to be that almost seemed kind of a flimsy um category for me. What do you think about that?
Well, my opinion about all that, coming from the French culture, is that I want to blur the lines between fiction and nonfiction and memoir. I know it's not the American way. Sometimes they want to know, is that true? Did it
Yeah,
really
yeah. Is
happen?
this
Or was that fiction? I don't feel, I feel that you can mix it. I come more from like the autofiction kind of genre type of writing which I think every writer uses their life and then they make whatever they want with it. So that's where I come from. I come from that and I like to write that way. I think that the memoir genre has kind of died away. I mean, there was like this big, I think it was in the noughts, like 2000, and now I think we're back with novels, like quote unquote. I mean, like we were talking about Bret Easton Ellis. I mean, I read The Shards. I loved it. I thought it was really good. But this is like, he's using his own name, even though we know it's fiction, but he's using his own memoirs of when he was 20. So, I found that interesting to sort of mix it all up and, publish it as a novel.
yeah, I
It
think
doesn't
yes.
matter.
Yeah, I think yeah, with some of his books, I think when he moved back to LA, I think he kind of like just found some of these stories, kind of these loose ends that he never really thought about. you know, that like 20 years had passed and he'd come back to LA.
Mm, yeah.
He just kind of discovered this whole kind of, so some of his books post 2000 are just about just kind of like this, you know, thought like what if he never went to New York, you know, what would he be like? Or, you know, he like, I guess The Shards was about some murderer that, you know, that he was kind of fascinated with. He became,
Yeah, yeah, right, right. But by the way, I think the book you were trying to, I think it's the Informer, the book of short stories you were thinking.
yeah, that's the one I interviewed him on. He
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that had
But
come out.
but I would say, for instance, for me, you know, I have this genre of writing after breakups, you know, like it is like the second book I'm writing after my narrator having just had a breakup. So it's a kind of new genre that I don't know how long I will keep doing that. But After David, which is the new one, is, you know, about my narrator
Yeah.
having recently divorced, being in her 60s, and trying out online dating, trying
Yeah,
out the apps.
yeah, another memory from this. I remember, like, because you were kind of in the Village Voice, and you know the New York Observer used to have a lot of
Oh
literary
yeah,
coverage, and they used to write kind of page six type of things of
yeah,
the book. And I remember we went to this party at this filmmaker's house over near Thompson Square Park and the Jim Secora, and we were just hanging out. And the guy goes, "Hey, you're famous." I got a celebrity here at my party. You know, it's
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
weird.
yeah.
We were just kind of laughing and chuckling it up because,
Yeah, New York Observer. Well, that's where Carrie Bradshaw started her life. I mean, her life as a fictional character.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I mean, it was, you know, like, yeah, Sex in the City, etc. I mean, this was like all coming together at that time.
Right. Yeah. So let's get to After David. I mean, this is like the other books, but it seems more accessible. It seems like some of the other books, it's maybe it's good to read, you know, have some literary know-how, maybe read your former books. And this one you could just like, it could be a standalone book
Oh,
maybe.
totally. Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
it just
Yeah.
seems like more accessible. It just seems like I mean, you just go right to the, you know, it's very naked writing. It's just like, okay, you're in the mind of the narrator and like living her life, and you know, it's everything's very, there's an immediacy about everything, you know,
Okay. Hmm.
and it just seems like you're thrown right into this relationship or her mentality and stuff. That I think that's really good. What's good about this book? Maybe some of the other ones you're just kind of on the outside. You know, you kind of like this book. You just kind of become her, and you kind of like share her obsessions, so to
Hmm.
speak. You know, can you comment on that a little bit?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, I would thank you for saying that, because I was trying to do that too. This book was inspired by my own adventure in dating, online dating. And so I created that particular obsessive kind of situationship with this jazz musician, this guitarist. But mainly, I think the narrator is called Eve, and she still kind of realizes through this situationship or relationship that goes nowhere that she had not really recovered from her divorce. She has two daughters who are grown daughters. One of them actually just had a baby, who's married, and the other one is just leaving for college. I'm sorry, she just finished college and she's leaving for the first time to live on her own in Bushwick in Brooklyn. So it's a moment of change in the narrator's life. She's 62, and she's through that relationship with this young guitarist, much younger. He's 37, she's 62, and who, you know, she gets obsessed with him. She finally realizes that she has to move forward, and she was still caught in the old relationship with her husband, and this new person that she met makes her think of her young years with her husband, who was also a writer. So and then when that ends and she's able to walk away from it, she turns the page. So it's a crisis in that woman's life, of figuring out who she is, and where can she go from there. and what is she going to do with her life at this point? Does she really want to have a man with whom to live, or maybe not? Maybe she only wants a lover. And at the same time, she's a writer, and she's a fairly somewhat successful writer. So yeah, it is a moment in a woman's life, and it's very much about figuring out what you do as you're getting older as a woman.
Yeah, I noticed compared to some of the other books, there's way more pop culture in this book. There's more, mention of bands and French films and
Mm.
stuff, and maybe you mentioned Bret Easton Ellis. I mean, he does that in a few books.
So I don't know if I did this.
But it seemed
But
like
I do mention the movies, French movies and books. Yeah.
and music. It seems like there's
Music
more.
as well. Well, particularly because the lover or the love interest is a musician. So there's a lot of jazz in it. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like there's more, and yeah. I mean, some of the early books maybe not so much pop culture, just more other things, and
No, you're right. You're right.
but like yeah, and like when you read like older books. I mean, like I just read the Brothers Karamazov. I don't know if I even finished it the first time, but I read the whole thing recently. And yeah, when the characters get older, I mean, you don't really think of like their sex life or
Mhm.
what the how it kind of changes as they get in their 50s or 60s and stuff. I mean, you kind of want to explore that in books and writing and like stuff that you don't really think of, like somebody like the Karamazov or Raskolnikov or whoever, the people in the Magic Mountain, by Thomas Mann. You don't really think of like, oh, these people are getting older. What's their sex life like? Like what how does it change? I mean, you want to
Yeah,
explore that.
I think it's particularly for women. I think this is really, I want to explore that. First of all, because I'm getting older myself, and it's not something that's very much written about. It's kind of like at a certain point, you're just like, that's it. We don't talk about it. So I think that all the women I know, I mean, everybody's going, trying to figure out, what you do the next part of your life. Where do you go from there? So I do want to explore that. I actually wrote an essay about um, growing my hair white,
Yeah, yeah, I
which
remember that. Yeah,
which I did, yeah, during the pandemic. So it's all part of like, like exploring what's happening and what are we doing. But particularly women, I'm sure men are exploring that as well,
well,
but I feel, more for
well,
women.
is it more complicated for women? I mean, I think men like when I was 30, I had sex with women that were older than me, and then I had sex with women my own age, and then maybe 10 years when I was 40, when I was 42, 44, I had sex with women that were a lot younger than me and stuff, and it just seems like this. It doesn't really seem much different. It's the same for the guys. It's like it's whether if they're older, same age, or younger, it's like the same experience. Like what
Oh, interesting. Well, I think that it's more men have always had the freedom to do whatever they wanted, but I don't think it hasn't always been the case for women. First of all, women would be either married or like they would be old spinsters or. So this is kind of a new chapter in women's lives to say, well, what can we do? I mean, because there's a lot of pushback from society that at a certain age is supposed to just like, close the door and that's it, like you don't do anything anymore. You don't so it's really exploring what can happen.
Yeah, why do people have all these hangups? I think that's kind of falling away. I mean, since some of the societal structure, some of the religious structure falls away, and just people don't people go to church. I mean, my whole life, at least in America, things have become more. Yeah, I think things have become more secular in a way. And
I don't think it's about religion. I think it's about like deep-seated conservatism in a way, which is like, women are not supposed to do these things. Men can do whatever they want. So it's more about pushing, feminism. I mean, it's about feminism. I mean, it's pushing against sexism and also against ageism, which
yeah,
I think women are subjected to more than men.
yeah. I just think that that's people have fear or something. I don't know. Get over it, people. Okay, so like okay, so technology. I mean, like when I write, I a lot of the stuff I'm writing about is kind of happened in the 90s, and because I do that because I don't really want to have to deal with cell phones
Ah,
and
right.
technology. Only this new book of stories I've been working on for a couple of years. That's only because it's sort of sci-fi, it's sort of futuristic in a way. So I have to deal with with AI and robots and cell phones, but the most of the stuff I write about it take place in the 90s. I kind of go back to avoid. But you in this book, I mean, you got Tinder and women's using Tinder and stuff, and so technology is more a part of this book, computers and technology, than it would be in your previous books.
Oh, well, yeah, because this is where we are, right? Uh,
It's up to
that's the
date.
world we live in. I mean, certainly online dating all takes place online, or most of it, or a lot of it. And that's another thing that I wanted to explore, which is that sort of the the fantasy that takes place when you are online so much. It's and particularly in that online dating, which a quarter of it is happening somewhere else. It's happening in your fantasy, in your mind. So I thought that was very interesting to see how both characters, both main characters, the woman and the love interest, are both fantasizing basically and hardly ever meeting. It's all happening somewhere else, and that definitely comes from the technology.
Or, so if I understand you right, is you think online pornography is more of a thing now than it would be like
Oh,
30?
I don't know. I'm not the big consumer of
Well,
online
no,
pornography
well,
at
no,
all. But
well,
yeah, of course it didn't exist before, right? Like how
yeah.
long has it been existing? Like 10
Yeah, when I was
years?
a kid, you had to watch those like stag films in your
Oh,
your
right.
your,
Yeah.
your dad's like 8 millimeter projectors, and it was like, is there sex really going on in that film? And then there was the VHS era tapes, and then now it's like internet's all like porn all over the place now.
I guess,
Can't
yeah.
stop it. Okay, well, let me ask you. So what's next? What's after? Here's After David. This is the new book. People should go to Amazon or was it?
Anywhere, yeah. I mean,
it-
bookshop.org too. That's just like a lot of indie bookstores, but it's on Amazon for sure.
Amazon and CatherineTexier.com. They should go to that, or is it
Yeah, yeah. Although it's not updated, but so yeah.
and Amazon. And what's after David? What's going to
Well,
be?
I've been working I've had an interesting childhood. I was raised by my grandparents. My mother was a pretty wild woman and very free for her generation, traveled a lot, lived everywhere, and she had a camping car and was not much of a mother, but an interesting character. And I've been trying to write about her and about where I come from in France for a long time. So it's been a year now that I have a lot of pages of something that might be a memoir or it might be a novel. I keep going back and forth. So that's kind of my new project. Yes.
Okay, well, thanks for talking to me. After Day, it's definitely one of my. It's gonna when I make a list of my favorite books of the year, this is gonna be one of the top ones. So everyone, go buy 5 copies of this book and check out her reading at KGB. I mean, that's real. It's very old school. We were hanging out there in the 90s
And it's great. It's a great
with
place.
Franzen and David Foster Wallace and Elizabeth Wartell, Amanda Filipacci. Just everybody was like there, like standing on the sidewalk, going to, do I go up, have to go up those stairs again?
Yeah, it's still like that. I mean, it's very crowded and everybody's at the door and trying to get in. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
great.
it's going to be, you get there early because it's going to be packed. And, this is pretty exciting. And what are you going to do a lot more readings after this one or what?
I don't know. That's the last one that's planned, but who knows? I mean, it could come up again. It's always nice to do
Yeah, man,
reading.
go
Yeah.
on. Okay, well, let's see. Let's see. Let me, see. How do we? Okay.